So if you've been following my channel at all, and I don't know why you would be, you would likely know that I recently went on a trip to Japan. And if you've ever gone on a major trip like that before, the inevitable question you get asked when you get back is, oh, what was your favorite part of the trip? And I wish I could respond with something profound like seeing a majestic sunset over the Tokyo skyline, or hiking up Fushimi Inari Shrine in Kyoto, or going to the top of Mount Takone, but the real answer I sheepishly have to give is actually experiencing all the One Piece related sites in Japan. From getting to ride a real-life version of the Thousand Sunny Ship, to going to the One Piece theme park at Tokyo Tower and seeing the amazing live show there, to being able to get a multitude of figures of characters from the many figure shops found in Tokyo, where One Piece typically has its own dedicated section. I've never really talked about it on this channel before, so I hope those of you who come to me for my video game focus will indulge me a little bit on this one, but I absolutely adore One Piece. In many ways, I don't think I could ever properly articulate or justify. From the sheer amount of fun and memorable characters with amazing backstories, the massively detailed world, and the emotionally impactful storytelling. To this day, I still have trouble thinking about certain moments from the series without getting a little teary-eyed myself. This isn't saying there aren't other series I thoroughly enjoy to this level, and maybe I might talk about those in the future, but there's just something about Luffy and the rest of the Straw Hat crew adventuring across the Grand Line that keeps me coming back week after week for each new chapter like an addict needing their next fix. There are just all these little things to the series that make me love it so much. And clearly, I'm not the only one. I think it would be a bit of an understatement to say that One Piece is a popular series. After more than 900 chapters, adding up to approximately 90 volumes, over 800 anime episodes, 13 feature films, 16 TV specials, and a wide variety of other assorted related media that would take me forever to list off, One Piece stands at the peak of shonen anime as the Pirate King, and is considered by many to be the gold standard of what modern shonen series can be, greatly influencing those that would follow it and what some would expect of similar series. And while One Piece hasn't latched as strongly in the West as it has in the East due to various, let's call them localization issues, it's hard to deny its major impact in those areas in spite of it. Even after Bleach and the prequel to Boruto ended their runs in the magazine, One Piece is still holding strong as Shonen Jump's flagship title, regularly dominating the top-ranking slot for popularity over 2 decades at this point. And despite the sheer length of the series, the manga still tops sales charts year after year with no real signs of slowing down, especially after a huge resurgence following the Strong World film in 2010 that saw a massive increase in sales due to people purchasing older volumes in order to catch up. On top of this, in an Oricon survey in 2010, the author of the series, Ichiro Oda, ranked 4th for mangaka who've changed manga history, landing behind Osamu Tezuka, Akira Toriyama, and writing duo Hiroshi Fujimoto and Muto Abiko. And considering the pedigree of those names, that shows how highly regarded Oda's work really is. But how did One Piece become this absolute juggernaut in the anime manga world? What is it about this series chronicling the adventures of a pirate crew in particular that has grabbed so many readers worldwide over the course of 20 years and counting? A time span that has seen so many other series rise and fall. Well, there have been a multitude of videos that have attempted to explain why you should be watching/reading One Piece, or what makes it so special, whether it's the structure, its world building, its characters. But rather than attempt to do something that better people than me have already done, I'm going to instead look at how it became so great, and possibly figure out what made it so along the way. And if that doesn't make much sense in how that's anything different, just stick with me. So let's load up on cola, grab some meat, and set our sails to look into where this whole thing started, and how this story about a rubbery pirate became a cultural phenomenon. This is the story behind One Piece. Now, there are a lot of places to start to answer the question of how One Piece became the Japanese cultural juggernaut it is today. But to do this properly, we have to take a look at the man behind the series. And to do that, we'll have to go back, all the way to 1992 Tokyo, Japan, when Kirby's first game on the Nintendo Game Boy is released to critical acclaim, the Sailor Moon anime debuted on TV Ayashi, further fanning the fetish for Sailor Fuku uniforms, and Shonen Jump is selling record high numbers, due in no small part to the inclusion of Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball, which is seeing an unprecedented level of success at the time. And it was during this time that a 17-year-old Ichiro Oda would start working at Weekly Shonen Jump as a writing assistant. Since he was a kid, Oda wanted to be a manga artist, having looked up to authors like, and my apologies for my pronunciation on these, Fujiko Fujio, Yude Tamago, and Okamura Yoshiyuki, loving the worlds and characters they would create within the pages of their manga, which in turn greatly affected his own eventual style, even submitting an OC he created to a character design contest for Kinnikuman. Oda always dreamed of becoming a mangaka when he grew up, even though famous authors at the time warned against doing it as a profession, largely because of the struggles and dangers that are inherent to the job. Almost in spite of these warnings though, at the end of his time in high school, Oda began drafting and drawing his first one-shot manga, Wanted. Not That Wanted. This Wanted was a cowboy western story about a gunslinger fighting off bounty hunters coming for his head and the wacky antics that followed. Looking back on it now, the art is quite rough and the line work is shaky in places, but despite this being his first manga that he would submit for contests, Wanted had a good tempo and fun energy to it that makes it quite engaging to read even now, aspects that would become signatures to Oda's future works. And others at the time noticed these qualities too, as the one-shot won second place in Shonen Jump's Tesco Award for New Artists, which would lead to Oda getting the job as a writing assistant at the publication. Now, while at Shonen Jump between 1992 and early 1997, Oda would work on multiple titles that, again, I'm likely to butcher, such as Masaya Tokuhiro's Jungle King Tachan and Mizuno Tomodachi Kappaman, Shinobu Kaitani's Suzan Police Gang, and most notably, Nobuhiro Watsuki's extremely popular Rurouni Kenshin series. And we're just going to sidestep that elephant in the room entirely. During his time as a writing assistant though, and despite the sheer amount of time and effort it takes to work on a manga, even as an assistant, Oda was still crafting his own style by continually developing his own works, creating multiple one-shots like God's Gift to the Future, a short story about God conning a pickpocket into fixing a mistake he made in order to make the thief into a better person, Ikiyako, which is about a cowardly monk that has to defeat a cannibal yokai terrorizing a small mountain village, and Monsters, where a wandering samurai is forced to face off against a dragon that is threatening to destroy a Western-style town, elements of which would be later referenced in Oda's future manga. These one-shots, later compiled together with Oda's earlier work Wanted, all further demonstrate the skills that Oda had even back then, from the clever ways he would panel his stories, to the exaggerated reactions he would give his characters for comedic or emotional effect. But the most standout feature that they all seem to share was how he was able to bring so much life and emotion to his art by how he did action and motion sequences. All these one-shots were manga that were drawn as a way for Oda to practice his art, since they were inspired less by a story he was compelled to tell, but were more built around ideas Oda thought would be cool to draw, such as a monk swordsman or a detailed 2-page spread of a dragon being cleaved in two. These were ideas he believed audiences would enjoy being depicted, which is something we'll see come up later. But while they clearly all have a lot of love and effort put into them, and you could see his skills develop with each one, these one-shots weren't what Oda wanted to do long term, as he'd always planned to tell a longer form story. So in 1996, Oda would begin working on his childhood dream manga, a story chronicling the ongoing adventures of a pirate crew. Now, when Oda was younger, aside from manga like Doraemon and Kinnikuman, another thing he enjoyed was anime, specifically an anime called Vicky the Viking. The German, Austrian, Japanese developed cartoon told the story of Vicky, a young Viking that uses their wit to help out their band of Vikings through the many adventures they would go on. Honestly, even though the series might be a tad dated by today's standards, having a lower budget Hanna-Barbera quality to it, the show has a goofy, cartoonish charm to it, and you can see how this series would eventually inspire Oda in his own works. Since those younger days of watching the adventures of Vicky the Viking, Oda became enamored with the concept of rogue pirates going on these epic sea adventures, sans all the scurvy and other things, and as early as grade 7 started coming up with ideas for his own pirate story, gradually filling up notebook after notebook with ideas and concepts for it. On top of this, he even started researching into real-life pirates and privateers in order to better understand what life on the high seas was like, which you can tell from all the minute little nautical details and references to real-life pirates that crop up through his later works. So after putting out multiple one-shots, Oda decided he would finally take all the ideas he'd built up over the years and create his dream work. But before he attempted to make a serialized manga, Oda, and likely the editors at Shonen, wanted to make sure his ideas for the series worked on the page, and decided to write 2 more one-shots that were meant to act as pilots for his serialized series, both titled as Romance Dawn. Included in the final Shonen Jump season special, a version of Shonen Jump used to showcase up-and-coming mangaka, the first iteration of Romance Dawn was clearly a prototype for what One Piece was planned to be, having a lot of the core elements that the ongoing series would have once it was published, like the pirate Shanks passing on his treasured straw hat to the main character Luffy, Luffy gaining a rubber body after eating the Gum Gum fruit, and a Nami-like character that was abandoned as a child only to be later adopted. Though, one detail that didn't so much make it in as an actual detail of the world, but more as a thematic aspect of One Piece, was the idea that there were 2 types of pirates. Historically speaking, pirates have always been seen as villainous characters that were a blight on the oceans during their age, and while there's a roguish charm to them in written works, it can be hard to avoid that fact, especially when you're writing for kids. So Oda chose to separate the heroes that he would be focusing on and those they would be fighting. So he divided them into those that looted and pillaged called Morgania, and those that go on adventures and stop the more villainous pirates called Peacemains. This terminology wouldn't carry over exactly, but the core concept would, with Luffy's main impetus being that he simply wants to go on a grand adventure while unintentionally stopping many of the villainous pirates he would encounter along the way to becoming Pirate King. The addition of the government organization's Marines as the opposition to the pirates of the world likely was also bred from this change, as well as the core conceit to One Piece's world being that there's a lot of moral grayness both in the Marines and the pirates, with the conceit of one's own justice being a recurring theme for many of the characters related to the Marine Corps, including the fact that many of them struggle with the idea that there are morally acceptable pirates despite them going against the law. Meanwhile, the second iteration of Romance Dawn, which was actually included in Weekly Shonen Jump proper, is a little stranger, as it feels less like a prototype and more like Oda trying other ideas to see what else might work before committing to the final version. While it maintained the same fun tone as the first Romance Dawn, including many identical scenes and also pushing Luffy's personality closer to what it would later be, the second Romance Dawn made a few deviations that wouldn't make it into the final version. Most notably, Shanks' role as Luffy's role model being replaced by his grandfather, which feels less inspired because it removes a lot of the details that make the passing on of the Straw Hat unique, and turns it into more of a family treasure. Supposedly, the main reason for this change is that Oda wanted Shanks to be a surprise in the official first chapter of the series, so he didn't want to put him into the pilot that would be in the regular weekly Shonen Jump release schedule. Even doing a quick skim of the first two versions of Romance Dawn, you can tell that Oda had a strong sense for what he wanted this story to be, and had a lot of it planned out before he even started putting it onto the page and panel. While they were different in ways, both stories carried the heart of what would make One Piece what it is. This was a story Oda was compelled to tell. So after getting feedback on his 2 one-shots and planning out his first few chapters, both in terms of characters and arcs, Oda finally quit his assistant writing job and began work on his serial. And on August 4th, 1997, Shonen Jump Weekly published its first issue to include One Piece, printed along series like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Koche Kame, Captain Tsubasa, the newer series Yu-Gi-Oh! Before it became about a children's card game, and Oda's previous assistant writing job, Rurouni Kenshin. Opening on the final words of the Pirate King Gold Roger that inspired a new pirate age, and with the main character showing his dedication to his dream of becoming a pirate by stabbing himself in the face, One Piece quickly established how it would stand out, both from other series and from the earlier Romance Dawns. The cast early on grew and grew with each arc as the Straw Hat Pirates were formed and new rivals were encountered. Luffy's Gum Gum Fruit was no longer a single cursed item that gave the hero his rubber powers at the cost of his ability to swim. There were now multiple devil fruits out at sea, each with different types of power to imbue. And most importantly, Romance Dawn was no longer just about a pirate going out on an adventure. Now there was a goal to pursue, a long-term objective to strive for, and one that many other pirates were also gunning for. And with that, the world of One Piece exploded with possibilities and potential. And whether it was due to hard work or fate or possibly a mix of both, One Piece found an audience very early on in its publication, resulting in a rather extremely quick rise in Jump's popularity rankings. While it's hard to get the exact metrics, One Piece is shown to be at the top of the rankings from as early as the 3rd chapter, and continued to maintain that spot consistently throughout the early years of its release, despite the amount of other series that would start and end in that time frame, which may have been due to how it stood out. While it doesn't feel that different from other series like it in 2018, since the genre has been following similar trends over the years, One Piece was quite different from other shonen series in Jump at the time, while still perfectly representing the magazine's core principles. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure had its appeals and fanbases for sure, but it had a much more adult tone and art style to it, especially going into Part 5 and onward, which resulted in it eventually moving to a more mature-focused magazine. Koche Kame, on the other hand, was a fun slice-of-life gag manga, but didn't really have an ongoing narrative to follow, and a lot of other series at the time were either still attempting to figure out what they were, or were close to ending. But there was no most familiar sense of childlike fun and adventure that was at the core of One Piece, while still showing mature themes to its characters and how they were presented, like Sanji's near starving out at sea affecting his appreciation of food, or Zoro's pursuit in becoming the world's strongest swordsman regardless of the consequences. And being the only series about pirates didn't hurt One Piece's chances either, since it made it harder to really compare it to anything else. It's understandable to see why it got so popular so quickly, both with Jump's younger and older demographics. But there might be more to this than just One Piece's own artistic merits. A major contributing factor that could help to explain One Piece's initial success, beyond its own unique charms, is when it started, or more specifically, what had previously ended. Prior to One Piece's debut, the biggest series of the time, and even still to this day, was Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball. Starting in 1984 in the same manga magazine as One Piece would years later, Dragon Ball began its serialization as a gag manga retelling the classic Chinese tale Journey to the West, which gradually transformed into the battle shonen series known for people shooting giant laser blasts and punching each other really hard, and over the years became one of the biggest manga and anime series of all time, leaving a major impact on both mediums as a whole, which is why it's somewhat silly that I'm even bothering to explain to you what it is. Dragon Ball was so popular, in fact, that Shonen Jump sales numbers were at their peak during the series' run, a peak that the company would never truly reach again. And it's difficult to say how much traction One Piece would have gotten early on if it came onto the scene even just a few years earlier when Dragon Ball had been at the height of this success. That isn't saying that other series at the time didn't contribute to Jump's numbers, but Dragon Ball was the big seller of the time. So much so that it's hard not to notice that the sales of Shonen Jump started a steep descent when the series ended in '95 and left a massive power vacuum in their series lineup when it left. Other popular series that still ran in Jump, like Slam Dunk and JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, had their own fan bases, but nothing quite had that same nigh universal appeal that Dragon Ball seemed to have, both in Japan and later on in the West. I mean, people were so thirsty for more Dragon Ball that when the Z anime finished, they allowed for GT to be made. You see, 1997 was a year of transition for Shonen Jump, as they were greatly missing the audience that had left when Dragon Ball did, and other major titles ending like Slam Dunk were having similar effects on the magazine's sales numbers, which is why it was somewhat of a godsend for Jump that One Piece appeared when it did, as the magazine needed a new flagship title to push, and One Piece took a lot after their last major seller. The quicker, upbeat pace, the inventive and intense fight sequences, the balance of tough shonen badasses and gag characters, the pure, childlike focus on adventure. Even the main character Luffy was heavily modeled after Goku, being a naive, morally selfish boy that enjoyed eating and a good fight, but deeply cared for their friends. And these comparisons aren't unfounded either, since Oda himself has stated how important Dragon Ball was to his work, saying if there was no Dragon Ball, there would be no One Piece. In a lot of ways, you can say One Piece inherited the will of Dragon Ball, so to speak. Regardless though, while he greatly looked up to Toriyama's work, Oda never intended to blindly follow in his footsteps. And even if the editors may have pushed it this way, One Piece was in no way meant to be a replacement for Dragon Ball, quickly standing out as its own series, starting with its art. Rather than try to emulate any popular art styles of the time, Oda really embraced the odd and eccentric style he had developed over his time as an artist, resulting in him creating simple yet bizarre-looking designs for his characters while emphasizing the unique qualities to them, creating an extremely diverse cast of characters when it comes to their shapes and sizes. Simply going by the silhouettes, you can tell from a glance which characters are which, due to the way Oda stylizes them and the eccentric visuals he chooses to accent, which in turn gives them a lot of personality. But while the art style is a little off or goofy at times, especially during the first couple years of publication, this does not mean that it isn't overflowing with detail. Every character or background in One Piece has a huge amount of detail added in. With every new location that is established in the world, Oda packs all of them with visual information that tells so much about what the area and its inhabitants are like, in order to set the stage for the upcoming storyline and how it differentiates itself from other settings before it, which would only get more complex and unique as the series went on, and more outlandish locales would appear, further adding to the fantastical feeling that these places would have. In the reverse of this, he also has a talent in using the amount of visual detail in the background to emphasize a moment between characters by removing it all, going from a dense setting full of other characters and background elements to simply the subjects that are meant to be the focus surrounded by negative space, creating a strong visual connection between them since there's no longer any other information to take in. Like when the densely populated Logue Town fades away as Luffy looks on in awe at the execution stand where Gold D. Roger started the new pirate age. Due to the way each panel is used to the fullest effect, if one were to only skim through a chapter, they would be bound to miss all the little details and nuances that Oda squeezes into each page, which also translates to the way he does fight sequences. Since One Piece is a battle shonen series, a major focus is how fights between characters are depicted. A few years prior, JoJo popularized the trend of incorporating stranger power sets for characters past your basic elements like fire. And while One Piece doesn't have the same level of complexity in its fights and powers as JoJo's does, it's arguably on the same tier for its creativity, both in the abilities being utilized by characters and the way they are being portrayed, with the best example being Luffy's rubber body allowing him to stretch and expand in strange and unique ways, that allows for some amazing and now iconic moments when used in fights, like turning what would be a normal headbutt into a headbutt with a massive wind-up to it. With a combination of Oda's eccentric designs and ability to pace out the scene itself through the paneling, he's able to create extremely expressive fight sequences that make them a joy to see play out that go beyond simply having characters punch each other. But with all this said, while the early few arcs helped to establish One Piece's world and cast in Jump, it was when the series reached the Arlong Park arc that it took its first major step towards the One Piece everyone would know it as today. The earlier arcs definitely had a lot of the qualities that the series would be known for: a fun comedic tone, a detailed world that had different factions fighting for their own goals, super impactful scenes, all with the Dawn sound effects spread across the background for maximum effect, but these were merely the prelude to where the series was going. It was when Luffy and his crew got to Arlong Park, and we learned of Nami's backstory, as well as the heavier themes throughout the arc, that it felt like Oda really came into his own as a manga writer and artist. Being able to juxtapose the wacky comedy of the characters with the tragically emotional moments, grim seriousness, and intense fights, all without ever feeling like it has major tonal whiplash, became a genuine strength of the series. The way Oda writes his characters and uses them in scenes is what really makes them so likable, and despite being quite cartoonish at times, feel so fleshed out and real, which is what helps to keep pushing the story forward in interesting ways. It's fun seeing the Straw Hats pal around while sailing the high seas getting into trouble, and makes it enjoyable to go on this long-running adventure with them, but seeing them grow and change during conflicts, only to come out stronger as a crew, genuinely solidifies them as great characters, with Nico Robin becoming one of my personal all-time favorite characters after witnessing her personal journey through the Water 7 and Enies Lobby arcs. And while the Straw Hats don't have massive character arcs after their introductions, especially our main character Luffy, seeing the way they interact with the world and change it through their actions, causing developments in other characters, is what makes their writing so good and is part of what keeps people coming back week after week. Essentially, after the Arlong Park arc and the crew launched into the Grand Line, the series was no longer just another shonen battle series where the main characters were fighting against the rival pirate crew of the week. This was a world that needed to be explored and was so full of possibilities for unique adventures. A world where talking reindeer and perverted cyborgs weren't the craziest thing around, where a world government controlled everything in the shadows and only presented the citizens with what they wanted them to see as to not allow any kind of civil unrest. Because that's totally fictional. And power systems across the seas that created a sort of balance between the pirates and the marines on the Grand Line, but with each group or organization trying to make moves in order to get the upper hand on the others, and where a sea full of villainous beings constantly loomed over the horizon, and a single moment or decision can have very genuine consequences that can reverberate across the entire world. But even as the series became darker, having more serious and realistic tones in its story, it has always been able to maintain the lighthearted goofiness that was at the core of its earliest chapters, largely because Oda always writes with children in mind, believing that if they can like it, then everyone can like it. This is why characters have such exaggerated, cartoonish personalities, why, until very recently, and I'm sorry to tell the Zoro-Sanji shippers in the room, romance has never been a genuine focus of the series, why he avoids intense brutality or gore, showing just enough to establish characters' pain in fights without ever feeling like it relishes in it, and why he's never had Luffy kill off anyone he fights. Partly because Oda likes the idea of being able to potentially reuse characters later on, and he believes having the hero kill off his enemies sets a bad example for the kids that read One Piece. For all the adult storylines that come up, this is a shonen series at the end of the day, and he writes with that in mind. Oda wants to speak to kids, but like any good piece of media for that demographic, respects their intelligence enough not to feel the need to talk down or belittle them, which is likely why fans of the series range from little children to full-on adults that have grown up on the series. And I'm speaking as one of those adults. And that brings up something extremely important to this whole discussion, and that is how long One Piece has really been around. Because creating a series that has lasted for decades at this point isn't exactly easy to maintain, especially something that is created to be an ongoing narrative, on top of the fact that the series has kept a massive following throughout the years. Now, this entire time, I've been dancing around addressing or copying anything he said, largely because I doubt comparisons will do me any favors, but in Mr. Eyepatch Wolf's quality video, Why You Should Watch/Read One Piece, he brings up something that could help to explain maybe not how One Piece first became popular, but how it's maintained its popularity over the last 2 decades, which is Oda's use of both long-term and short-term storytelling. Well, the big question on everyone's mind when they first start going through One Piece is, what is the One Piece? Over the last 2 decades, we haven't really gotten much closer to answering it aside from small hints and larger speculations. And that is because of how Oda has paced out his story. Every arc is an almost self-contained narrative unto itself, with an opening exposition when the Straw Hats land on a new island and learn what's going on, followed by a rising action as the crew gets involved and things start to escalate, gradually leading to the climax with the antagonist of the arc, and ending with a denouement where the problems have resolved and the crew celebrates with a feast or party while preparing for the next destination. Then rinse and repeat. This way of structuring each arc makes it extremely easy to follow in the short term, despite all the new details that crop up with each island, on top of the years of lore that have built up in the long term. But while he writes each arc with a beginning, middle, and end in mind, Oda is constantly planting seeds for future developments, and thinking about how the arc will affect the larger framework of the story. Like when Jinbei is referred to as Arlong's boss in the Arlong Park arc, only for him to be properly introduced almost a decade later and resolving some of the plot threads that were established previously. And this is only one of 1,000 examples of this exact thing. While some of the bigger questions of the series are still left largely unanswered, Oda is regularly filling in details as the story goes forward, that not only reward those that have been following the series every time it drops some new information or tidbit, but also further expanding on the world and its possibilities, which also fuels the many One Piece related fan theorists online trying to piece together those bits of information together like some giant jigsaw puzzle. This is pretty cliched to say at this point, but it needs to be said regardless. And that is that One Piece is a story that isn't just about the destination. It's about the adventures and experiences along the way. The conclusion of an arc or storyline never feels like, oh, we're finally done with that, but more, where to next? Essentially, Oda still keeps his audience invested in seeing the long-term goals achieved by regularly sprinkling in short-term rewards into each arc. And it's because of this way of pacing out his story that has led to him continuing the series for so long. Oda originally only intended for One Piece to last for about 5 years, even planning to have a crew of 10 characters by the second year of publication. But as he wrote the series out and went further into it, he started coming up with more and more ideas for concepts he thought his readers would enjoy, and eventually it became this massive, fully realized world bursting with detail and complexity. Within just the span of 3 arcs, we see the Straw Hats travel to an island in the clouds in order to fight a god, challenge the world government over the fate of one of their crew, and be trapped on a massive horror-themed ship where skeletons talk and zombies are real. All storylines Oda packs with information and consideration for each island's own unique rules and place within the world, while still threading in future plot elements to expand on in upcoming storylines. All things he keeps track of in his many notebooks chronicling the story and world of One Piece. In fact, Oda has so much story that he wants to showcase that even the covers of chapters are used to explore what certain characters have been doing since the Straw Hats left them, such as the fishman Hachi from Arlong's crew escaping imprisonment in order to start a takoyaki shop, or the pirate Django and Lieutenant Fullbody developing a bromance and then becoming Captain Hina's devout followers, both storylines that would end up returning later on in the main plot. Where other mangaka are pushed by editorial staff to continue their series going long after the creator originally intended to due to its popularity, Oda fully knows where the series will end and only continues adding in more content because, in his own words, he doesn't want to deprive the fans of more fun ideas. And that leads me to my final point in this long, rambly mess. Everything I've mentioned helps to understand the media empire that One Piece has created, going from a single one-shot to a serialized manga, then an anime, then movies, and the list goes on. But there's one final piece that, more than anything, might help to explain why One Piece became the phenomenon it is and has stuck with people for so long. I think the part of One Piece that resonates so much with its fans is its core theme. This series is full of themes of regret, of racism, of corruption, and especially themes of friendship and adventure. But the one that it all frequently comes back to and reinforces is chasing after your dream. Almost every character found in the story is pursuing a larger goal of some kind. Whether that's getting married, atoning for past sins, becoming the greatest swordsman ever, keeping a promise with an old friend, bridging the worlds between humans and fishmen, trying to reach the moon, becoming the pirate king, or just being able to draw manga. For Oda, writing One Piece has always been his dream. This is something he wanted to do since he was a child, and he's been pursuing it ever since. This is why Oda seems to have no issue working as hard as he does, even if it becomes doing 20-hour workdays 7 days a week, and how he can confidently say that to work on the series, you have to be willing to die for it. Despite going for more than 20 years at this point, Oda still writes One Piece with the same resolute passion he had when he started, and I think that's what makes One Piece so unique, even outside of manga and anime. At its very core, it's about that passion to fight for what you want. Now, just like any series, One Piece does have its flaws for sure. There are arcs that are much weaker than others, the way women are portrayed throughout the series can be a bit spotty, and the anime can be quite lackluster at times, and after the time skip, started to be stretched to an ungodly degree in order to ensure it didn't outpace the manga, which is a topic for another day. But the series is still amazing in spite of those issues. And I think that's because, whether you're reading or watching One Piece, you're seeing an artist put their heart and soul into their work, flaws and all. This isn't to disregard the many people that bring us the One Piece manga and anime, from the editors, assistants, and animators, but ultimately, One Piece is Oda. Just like Luffy, Oda started off with a larger-than-life dream, despite it being something others might consider them foolish for pursuing. But after gaining inspiration and learning from those who gained their own success in it, started fighting for that goal, which eventually led to him going on his own adventure. And while there were stumbling points and learning curves, each step was in pursuit of that dream. And as he went on, gained more and more attention for his actions, leading to inspiring some, forming rivalries with others, and gaining a monumental level of infamy and recognition worldwide. But in the end, it never was about any kind of riches or infamy or prestige. It's always been just about having a fun adventure, and only time will really tell where that will take them.